August the 17th, 2023. As you're looking at current satellite images of the U.S., you can see parts of Mexico. You can see Hurricane Hillary down in the bottom left. You can see the Canadian smoke that is now dipping down and about to enter North Mississippi right along the Phoenix area. So all of my friends down through Arkansas and Tennessee and in North Mississippi, which one of our friends has 2 of our husky puppies since they were 8 weeks old. And now they're 5 months old. But anyway, make sure that you're aware for all your pets and animals that this smoke is going to be coming in and pressing through tonight. Now, again, you've got Hurricane Hillary in the bottom left. And what that's going to do, guys, more than likely, is to feed moisture into Arizona, Nevada, possibly Arizona. But the last time that you had a hurricane like this that may actually make landfall in Southern California, you had massive landslides and large floods, guys. So be aware of that. You could see a lot of dry areas start to fill up. So just make sure you're aware of that. Now, what's happening, besides the tropical update that we're going to go through, is we're about to go into the hottest weather of one of the hottest summers I can remember. And we'll take a look at all of this. And what that's going to do is it's going to be a large high-pressure dome over the central U.S. all the way down into the Gulf of Mexico. And the high-pressure system like that, it rotates clockwise. A low-pressure system like a hurricane will rotate counterclockwise. So around this system that's setting up in the Midwest down into the Gulf, all the moisture that you see now coming in through the southwestern U.S. on the left of your screen, that's going to be channeled in on top of the high pressure. Then there's a cold front that's going to be pushing cooler air down from Canada. So where the high pressure meets and all of this moisture is being channeled on top of the high pressure, it keeps it dry. It doesn't let a lot of air move through it. It's stationary area, and that's why it's so hot. But in those areas like New York and up into that area where the edge of the high-pressure dome is going to be, you're going to see very strong storms, tornadoes, hail, things like that. And so we're going to see highest record heats. We're going to see some of the strongest storms of the summer. And some of these heat records are, since have been measuring heat records here in the U.S., and I mentioned this before, as a lot of people say, well, they're exaggerating the numbers, but I do want to remind you that I have 2 weather stations, just small ones here, that give me the temperature and wind speed, rainfall, humidity, real feel, heat indices, and things like that. I have 2 of them here, so there's no one in between me and the information that I give you. And today it started heating back up. We actually hit 100 degrees heat index. We were around 95 as far as the Fahrenheit and degrees. Right now at 6:32 p.m. Central, we are at 92 degrees Fahrenheit. Starting to get later in the afternoon, real feel at 96. That's all going to change. Here in central Mississippi, we may see 107, not heat index, not heat or real feel, but actual temperatures. That's going to push us well above the 120s in the heat indices, guys. And we've seen that. We could see 130s. But the saving grace, and we're going to look at it again, for the very coastal areas along the Gulf and the northern Gulf, is that the tropical systems pushing through are going to be right at the bottom of that high pressure area. Now, what did I say? They rotate clockwise, right? And the storms are going to be on the edges of the high pressure dome. So that means the storms coming along the Gulf Coast are going to be experiencing the same strengthening and lower pressure than we've seen all year. Notice also entering the Gulf of Mexico is the Saharan sand. Check that out. Also, you can see it before the sun sets north of the Bahamas in the middle right of your screen. But that's very thick Saharan dust. Now that's going to absorb some of the moisture, but I think we have turned that point to where the tropics are going to take over. Now let's change the filters here just a moment and look at what we've got as far as moisture. Florida, you are getting some rain. I hope you need it. Look at South Georgia. You're starting to get some of this. Now, one of the things we're going to talk about in the tropical updates here is the possibilities of a strike in the Georgia area. So just stay tuned for that. Again, your moisture coming up in the left from Hurricane Hillary is not expected to go into the Sea of Cortez. It's supposed to stay to the left here. Let me stop this a moment. They're expecting this storm to track up on the outside, and that's going to keep it in the ocean, keep energy fed, and move into Southern California like this. Now, instead of moving out towards Hawaii, so that's why I'm saying you may see record flooding in Southern California. Remember that. Now, I want to shift everything north quite a bit here. You can see Canada here, parts of Alaska. But what's happening is this front that's right here, guys, is going to push down and bring cooler air. But what's happening is, while it's doing that, this dome of heat is going to set up here. Now, what that will do is squeeze the hot air that's here on the borders of it and the moisture that's pressed out of it in the cool front coming down along this edge and along down the northeast. So starting tonight, guys, you're going to start to see weather, and this is going to go on for we're going to have actually 2 high pressure areas come in probably up until 3 weeks from now. Now, I think sometimes around mid-September we're going to start to see a break in some of this. But again, let's take a look at this. All of the moisture coming in over in the California, Nevada, into Arizona, all of that on the left coast. You can see it starting to turn. Now, it wants to dive where wildfire smoke is coming in, but the high pressure is going to train all of that into the northeast, and it's going to be a squeeze thing between very high pressure and low cool pressure with moisture. So the northeast, you're in for it for the next few days. Make sure you're aware of that. Now, here's a chart from today from AccuWeather, and it says the heat wave expands August 18th through the 22nd. Tomorrow's the 18th. Record highs are going to be challenged, hottest of the season for the Midwest. And what you can see here in the red is where the heat's going to be. The high pressure area is rotating clockwise. You see the black arrows here, and the jet stream here is going to be pushed over it. What that means is, again, the cool air coming out of Canada is going to, and the high pressure is going to squeeze everything into a narrow area, of very severe weather along this east coast. Now, this is for Saturday afternoon, and it's talking about heat expands. This is the Midwest, and this is the temperatures we've been getting here in central Mississippi. But you're talking about in the dark red, which is just east of Oklahoma City up through east of Wichita. You're talking about 110 to 115 degrees. That's real feel, not heat index, which is higher than that. But a real feel of 110 to 115 goes out into the red at 105 to 110, the lighter red at 100 to 105. Real feel. That means what you're going to feel. Now, we've been having that for the last few months here in Mississippi, so that's how strong this high pressure is going to be. And then north of Aberdeen, Sioux Falls, up in that area, that's where everything's going to be looping down to you guys in the northeast. Again, this is marked for Saturday afternoon, but tonight start watching for this severe weather. Now, something to keep in mind is this drought monitor, because in the red areas south of Wichita and south of Omaha there, you're talking about exceptional drought. You can see the scale on the left, dark brown's extreme down to dry. That is going to change. It's going to get worse than this with that high pressure system setting over you with that high temperature. That's going to increase the threat of wildfires, things like that, guys. But I've noticed in the comments and reports that I've read around the U.S. and, as a matter of fact, in other nations around the world, massive garden loss, massive crop loss. Not everywhere, but a lot of people are saying that everything's burning up. You guys in the Northeast said just those few days of that intense weather has triggered these wildfires. has decimated the vegetation. Guys, we're living in an extreme time. Now, early next week, this is called the pattern change. And you can see you've got the high pressure area sitting here, rotating clockwise, and much needed Gulf moisture, steering winds coming in from the east right through here. And this is the area they think that first system will come in. But guys, the second one has changed, and Florida and the Carolinas, pay very close attention to it. We're going to get there. But again, this is going to move north, and because of this much needed cooler or tropical air coming in, so you're going to get a break along the coast, and right in here it's going to push more of it to the north. But that's not until next week. We got to get through this weekend. Now, this is the latest this evening from the National Hurricane Center down in Miami, Florida, guys. An 8 p.m. update. That's Eastern time, but check this out. They're now watching 4 different systems. We'll start right here in the Gulf of Mexico. Still a 30% chance of this thing forming anywhere inside of this area. But notice it's right here where I've been talking about that system that's moving over Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and supposed to skate into South Florida. We're going to take a look at the radar on that. And that is going to be the first thing that breaks into the tropical system in the Gulf of Mexico itself. Behind it here, we got a 20% chance of development on this system, a 50% chance here, and a 70% chance of this one. Now, this is the latest at 8 p.m. this evening Eastern time from the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. First, we still have a 30% chance of something forming here. Now they put an X out here. They didn't have that before. And this is that system that we're watching coming over the Dominican Republic and Haiti that's going to move north through this between Cuba and Florida and form this. Now, depending on exactly where the high pressure system is north of us that we're about to go through this record heat with, will determine where it comes ashore. If it starts to lift further to the north, like they're predicting, that will make it move further to the north, somewhere in this area. It could move as far as Galveston, Texas area, but it's not predicted to become extremely strong yet. But the waters now in the Gulf are at record temperature. Let's see what it says. An area of disturbed weather located just north of Hispaniola is forecast to move into the Gulf of Mexico by early next week, where a broad area of low pressure could form, and that's exactly what's happening in the pressure models. High pressure to the north and extremely low pressure in the Gulf of Mexico. Low pressure, stronger storms. Some slow developments of this system is possible thereafter as it moves westward and approaches the western Gulf of Mexico coastline by the middle of next week. Now, Tuesday is 22nd, so 22nd, 23rd, we could be seeing some tropical movement into the Texas area. You're in a drought, you need it. We don't need a Cat 3 or higher hurricane. That's not what I'm talking about. Tropical rain would be very good. Now, the system in the back, 70% chance of development, but what they're saying, over the next few days, environmental conditions appear mostly favorable for additional development while it moves toward the west, northwest, or northwest at around 10 miles an hour across the eastern tropical Atlantic. And a tropical depression is likely to form over the weekend before environmental conditions become unfavorable for development early next week. It's going to be moving into the Saharan sand layer, and even though the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico are in record heat as far as sea surface temperatures, this thing may not get past this large area of Saharan dust. These two we're going to have to watch because there's been a change in the high pressure systems. If you look at them now, they're going to turn north and northwest like this because there's an opening. Let me kind of point this out a little better maybe. High pressure's here, and there's going to be an opening here. And that's going to start to pull these storms to the north. But in the last day or so, this is going to close off and probably right into this area around North Carolina, border there, and Virginia. So anything in here that's moving this way could be trapped under it and forced in here. Now, there's a storm that's forming here that they're not talking about now in the Caribbean that may be more destructive than all of these. And now it's supposed to strengthen. We were talking about South Florida, but coming through this area and maybe impacting right into here is a major hurricane right at the bottom end of this low pressure. So this one would probably get there first because it's going to become very strong. This one could follow right behind it, or either one of these, because again, it's going to be trapped in these high pressure zones. That's what steers it. Now let's take a look at satellite images of the tropical Atlantic. Now we have these three storms that are basically in a line between here, that storm that's the strongest chance of now, as we see the sun setting over the Atlantic, you can see a line of these three storms here, here, and here. And so that's what we're dealing with. These two are going to be the ones to watch. And this is the system, and we're starting to see a little bit of outflow right here and a little bit of tightening up of these storms. Notice that right here on the outer edges. So the stronger this becomes, the stronger it will be when it gets into the Gulf of Mexico. But these two right here, we're going to have to pay attention to them coming in. But guys, again, the most important system will be coming out of the Caribbean for the U.S. right in this area, right there. Let's take a look at those models. Now let's take a look at the Canadian model. Before I start playing this, let's look at our setup. This green area here are the three storms that are lining up. Here's the high pressure. The darker the orange, the higher the pressure, the less the hurricanes want to fool with that. That extends all the way into the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula. Before we start the video, again, to timestamps today, and we'll just kind of let this play forward slowly, and you'll see that the high pressure system starts to move somewhat. These systems will start to pull into that area, then it will become a little more cut off. High pressure here is bringing us our record heat, guys. Check that out. Next few days. Here our systems are starting to form. Now I'm going to speed this up. First system goes here. Now it's going into Mexico instead of Texas. Here's the problem right there. This is August 27th. We got a major hurricane just off the Georgia, South Carolina coast. Now I'm going to stop this in a couple areas. These storms are getting pulled up into this vacuum. But that's going to be cut off. Watch. This is going to lock back up. This storm is setting there. The very powerful one coming out of the Atlantic. We'll let it play through one more time, and I'll stop it at the end. Right there, coming over Cuba, across South Florida. We'll stop it. The opening that was here is closed off and forcing this back into the northeast. But the yellow area is where the pressure is increasing. As this thing approaches wherever it's going to come into, the North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia area, will depend on how far this orange area is pushed back this way or this way. Right now, it looks like it's going to come in, say, possibly either to North Carolina at this path, looking at the low pressure that's here. The lowest areas are where the green points further to the north. And so coming into North Carolina, Hatteras area, somewhere out there, Outer Banks, could be where this is hitting. But already it has crossed Florida. You've had an impact down in the Keys, Miami, up through Fort Lauderdale into that area. And now you've got a storm that's setting off the coastline. Now this is going to pull a lot of heat, and we don't know the exact path yet because this is what we have. It will change each day. Now let me say this. As we watch that storm come in here, more than likely it's going to follow this dip in the low pressure right into this area. Now this storm and this storm are going to be cut off from what they thought was an escape that had opened here and possibly be forced into very close to the similar area that this huge storm is. Now, as time goes forward, we'll see this move and we'll see these possibly strengthen. The third one has already been dissipated into the, again, Sahara and sand layer. But this is going to be something we really have to watch, because they're not going to want to move into this orange higher pressure area. So guys along the East Coast, all the way from New York, further south, all the way really to South Florida, pay very close attention to these three storms. Now again, before that, we saw a smaller system that may bring rain into Mexico and Texas. But we know from the last 10 years or 12 years that this is going to change. But this is what we're looking at now. So South Florida, Cuba, Jamaica, you need to be prepared for this. The Carolinas, we are dealing with record temperatures, record heat, record high pressure, record low pressure. What is that going to lead to? Possibly superstorms coming into the East Coast and the Gulf of Mexico. Again, we're still 13 days or so away from the peak of hurricane season, and it's ramping up very quickly. Guys, pay close attention. We're watching it. You watch it. It's a heads up. Be safe.